Hello and welcome to today's video. In this video, we're going to take a look at loops. When I say loop, I specifically talk about for loop and while loop in C programming. Let me say in simple terms, loops are basically blocks of code that we write in our program to perform an operation multiple times. So remember when we write our hello world example, imagine we want to print that hello world 5 times. So what would you do? You will copy and paste the printf function 5 times? No, that doesn't make sense at all. I mean, you wouldn't go and literally copy paste printf function 5 times to print hello world 5 times on the screen. The best way is to use loop. We just tell the compiler, take this block of code and print it for me 5 times. In this case, take this printf function that says hello world and print it 5 times for me. For example, when you wanted to write a code to analyze and design members of a structure, you're not going to copy and paste the code for every structure member. You're going to use a loop that uses that analyze code for every member in that structure. You need to know conditions and branches to be able to follow this video. If you haven't watched that video yet, I would highly recommend to click on the card here and go watch that video. The example I gave you earlier is printing hello world 5 times. You could just get away by copy pasting the code 5 times. Let's copy the paste the code 5 times. Compile and run the code. As you can see, hello world prints 5 times on the screen. But let us make our life a bit easier and let's start with the for loop. For loop starts with the keyword for and basically breaks into 3 different parts, and each part is separated using semicolon. The first part is the variable declaration. So usually we declare a variable here. In this case, int I equal to 0. I is just a name, it could be anything. I would say I is a convention because it's probably the first letter in the word iterator, but we use I as the iterator in our for loop. And this int I equal to 0, it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be int, it doesn't have to equal to 0, and it doesn't have to be I. The second part is the condition. We're basically telling the compiler, as long as this condition is true, continue compiling the block of code for the for loop. In this case, we wanted to print 5 hello worlds on the screen. So I less than 5. As long as this condition I less than 5 is true, it will continue printing the code I want. The last part is the command that will be called before the next iteration for each loop in our for loop. In this case, I will use I++. The last part is the command that will be called before the next iteration for each loop in our for loop. In this case, I will use I++.
Wait, what? What is I++?
I++ is basically I equal to I plus 1. It means that after each iteration, the iterator will be incremented. We'll add 1 to the iterator. What's important here is that I initialized I as 0. Now each time it's being incremented by 1, so after the first loop, it will be 1. After the second loop, it will be 2. After the third loop, it will be 3, and this continues. We're going to increment it by 1 in every single iteration of the for loop. And then, of course, we provide the body, which is the way to tell the compiler anything in this body between the curly brackets lines 6, 7, and 8 is the context of our for loop. This is the code that will be looped, the code that will be executed in each iteration. But be careful, it is the condition that decides how many times the code will be executed. It could be 1 time or 100 times. Let me move one of the printf function to the body of the code and get rid of the rest. If compile and run, the code will return what we're looking for. So Control F5, and you can see that 5 hello words are printed on the screen. Now let's break this down a little bit. When the instruction pointer reaches to this line of the code, first it will declare what is written in here, int I equal to 0. In this case, we're declaring a new variable called I. Then it will immediately check to see if the condition is true. So is I less than 5? And then we'll go ahead and jump to the body of the for loop. The body of the for loop, and we'll execute it, whatever is there. When it finished executing the body and hit this closing curly bracket, we are going to go back here and execute this line of the code, which is I equal to I plus 1. After that happens, it goes back and checks the condition. First, I was 0, then after one loop, I was incremented to 1. Now it's checking I against 5. 1 is less than 5. The condition is true. Then the next step is executing the body of the code. So all the code between the curly brackets would be executed. It will keep going and run this code and jump here and increment I by 1. After that happens, it goes back and check if the condition is true or not. The condition is I less than 5. I is incremented. It is 1. It is not 0 anymore. 1 is less than 5. Yes, it is true. The condition is true. So we'll jump here and perform the code between the curly brackets. It will keep running this code and jump up here and increment I after each single loop. And when we get to the point that I is 5, the condition is not true anymore. So if I is 5, 5 less than 5 returns false. And we'll be jumped to the end of the closing curly bracket. And the rest of the code will be executed, which in this case is return 0. This is how a for loop works. The most important parts of a for loop is the 3 parts I talked about. The first part declares the variable and initialize it in the beginning of a for loop. Once the for loop is being executed for the first time, this is a comparison or some kind of boolean. It will be evaluated before the next iteration of the for loop. And this is a kind of code that will be called at the end of each iteration. For the declaration part, I can move it outside the for loop, and it would still work. So let's compile and run our code, and you see that hello world is printed on the screen. Or I can declare my variable outside the loop and initialize it inside the loop. And as you can see, it's still working. Let's break the for loop into details. For loops are really flexible. We can do many things with using for loops. Let us debug the code to see exactly what is happening here. I said each part of a for loop is a command, so we can place them in different lines of code. It should be alright if I hit enter here and here. So now all 3 of them are in 3 different lines. I can place a breaking point at line 5 and start debugging my code. Okay, at this stage, I is negative minus 8 million something. It means that I hasn't been initialized yet. So if I click a step over and a step over this line, you'd see that I is initialized and now I is 0. And we are at the condition right now. So I less than 5 is being computed, and the result of I less than 5 is true. If I step over this line, you would see that I'm not going to the code at line 7. I'm going directly to the body of the for loop because the condition was true. So the program here, the function, asks for printing hello world. If I step over the print function, as you can see, one hello world is printed on the screen. If I step over, now at the end of the first loop, I'll be redirected to line 7. Line 7 is the line that we increment I. But be careful, the yellow arrow means that line 7 hasn't been executed yet. So if I hover my mouse on I, it says I equal to 0. If I increment, now I is 1. If I hover my mouse on I at line 6, I is 1, and I less than 5, yes, 1 is less than 5. So if I step over this line, I'll jump to the body of the for loop, to the printf function. And if I step over the printf function, I should see another printf printed on the screen. So we can continue this until I is 4. So now I is 4, we're at the condition is true. We're going to the body of the function. The fifth printf will be executed and all 5 hello words are on the screen. And if I step over here, I'm going to the increment part. This time, if I step over line 7, I would be 5. Okay, as you can see, if I hover my mouse in Visual Studio, it shows that I is 5. But 5 is not less than 5. The condition is not true anymore. If I step over this line, I'll be redirected to the end of the for loop, and the next code after the for loop is returned 0. So I hope you've seen how the for loop works. You remember I said you can use I++. I++ is identical to I equal to I plus 1. So if I compile and run this code, it will have the exact behavior. But what if I wanted to increment by 2? So I would say I is equal to I plus 2. How this code works, let's debug this code. Okay, so at first step, I is 1. The only time that this line of code will be executed is the first loop. First when we reach the for loop. And it will check to see if I is less than 5. 0 is less than 5, so it will proceed, print hello world for us, and then go back to the increment command. In the increment command, we'll see that I is equal to I plus 2. So if I step over this line, I would become 2 from 0. Now if I hover my mouse here on Visual Studio, it shows that I is equal to, or if I look at the, so this the value of I is 2. If I continue the code and increment it another time, the value of I becomes 4. If I hover my mouse on I, it says 4. If I continue debugging, and continue it another time, now we jump to the increment command, and now increment command will increment I by 2, which will be 6. 6 is less than 5. No, the result is false. So the for loop wouldn't be executed, and the code will be jumped to the line 12, which is returned 0. And if I step over, you would see that happens. And if I look at the output is hello world is being printed 3 times because we incremented I by 2 rather than 1. So this concludes our video for today. As always, if you have any question, please let me know, and have a great day. See you in the next lecture.